Wait for it. Russia. The riddle, the mystery, the enigma. A country that's so hostile that even the accent sounds harsh and negative.
My bird.
I can get you a bird, I can get you 10 birds.
I want my bird.
At least that's how the West understands it, projects it, and broadcasts it. But what about the rest of the world, aka the global south? Is Russia still living in the old colonial mindset of power hungry nations, or things are a little different? Let's understand why Russia behaves the way it does. Ever since I was a child, I was fascinated with maps and finding different places around the world. And I used to wonder why so many national capitals are on one corner of the country. Just look at Canada, USA, Australia, and even China and Russia. Russia, especially Russia. Why is Russia part of Europe and not Asia? After all, the larger Russian landmass is in Asia. These trivial questions generally took me on a journey, an exploration of world history and geography, and it's all connected. I want you to understand this point. The geography, from natural terrain to man-made borders, and the history, from nation building to national identity, define the country and the attitude of its rulers towards its people, its neighbors, and even the larger world. For Russia and Russian leaders, be it the forgotten Tsars, Stalin, or even Putin, the Russian worldview doesn't change. Let me show you something. Russia is in fact part of Europe. The idea of Russian identity starts from the Slavic settlements in Kiev, Ukraine, over here. The major centers of the clan moved to Moscow, Muscovy, only after the Mongol invasions from the east. In Moscow, as the empire grew, the rulers understood the vulnerable nature of their geography. The European grasslands from Ural Mountain to Caucasus Mountain to the Carpathian Mountains, which they had easily conquered, was also a very easy target for others to attack from east and west. Their solution to this problem? The best defense is a good offense. In a comparatively short time period, they expanded eastward, and way past Ural, they gained control over the Eurasian grasslands and gradually deep into the Siberian forest. Therefore, the vast Russian empire that we know of is largely a buffer zone. The approach to control these lands can be called wild, but the empire was built as a defense mechanism to counter any future attack to the Russian heartland from the Khanate rulers. Russia, therefore, doesn't have much to do with Asia. But building a buffer zone is one thing, and actively engaging and making friends with Asian powers like Russia is doing today with China, India, even Saudi Arabia and Iran is something different. What's going on here and why it's happening? We'll get to it, but before that, let's look to the west of Russia, Europe. The modern world is built on the European principles of democracy and rule of law. The history is literally written with the European conquests and discoveries, but it all started in the 15th and 16th century in a period known as Renaissance. Russia was part of Europe, but distant and without a seaport. The ambitious Russian rulers of the time, Ivan the Great and Ivan the Terrible, knew the road to a powerful Russian empire will pass through Europe, and therefore they must control or at least have access to the European heartland and the European sea trade. One small request: if you are still watching and you like the content even a little bit, please like and subscribe. It's a small channel, it will mean a lot. So let's go back in time and witness how Europe changed and how Russia used this change. As Russia was expanding its influence, the Eastern Roman Empire had fallen. Renaissance was challenging the old political and religious thinking, and the European naval explorations were booming. The fall of Constantinople gave the opportunity to Ivan the Great Russian ruler to project Moscow as the third Rome, basically continuing the symbolism of Roman Empire and making Russia a European power in the process, which was obviously not accepted by Europe. His grandson became the first Russian Tsar, who then tried to expand Russia to the European coast. This era of expansion didn't last long, and Russia was sent back from the European coast to face the old security challenge against their weak geography. But by this time, Russia had understood its second security challenge, that is, no Russian access to any seaport. It restricted their ability to grow economically with the popular sea trade. We all know the Arctic coastline of Russia is frozen all year round. Over the next century, Russia fought many wars to gain access to the Baltic coast and Black Sea. And finally, in 1721, Russia became a European power and gained access to the Baltic Sea. Imagine the importance of a port city for Russia, that the newly formed coastal city of St. Petersburg was made the Russian capital, and that's not even a warm water seaport functioning all year round. By the end of 18th century, Russia even had access to Black Sea through Crimea. But sadly for Russia, to reach the open sea water, Russia still had to pass through the narrow Bosphorus Strait and the Strait of Gibraltar. Russia has been in a war, either attacking or under attack, for the past many centuries. It was under attack by both Napoleon and Hitler, and both the armies reached Moscow. Post World War II, it was engaged in a Cold War with US led NATO alliance. Tim Marshall, in his book Prisoners of Geography, mentions since 1812, North European invaders have attacked Russia on an average of once every 33 years. How's that for perspective? Before moving to the present chaos in the world order, let's quickly summarize the behavior of Russian leaders. The Russian worldview is of survival through offense as defense, leading to a greater control. Like in the past, Russia still faces the same existential crisis based on its historic and geographic limitations, with a few additions. The North European plains are still vulnerable, but the missile and drone technologies have changed the warfare. No country wishes to be in range of an enemy missile. Therefore, a buffer state is a must. The frozen Arctic on the north and no access to warm water seaport, Russia will remain dependent and restricted for trade and ship movement. The new third challenge Russia faces is its depleting population, which is heavily dependent on the natural resources as their major source of national income. These problems and its hostility with neighbors limit Russia to a corner, which is very embarrassing for its leaders. Looking for any opportunity to move past these embarrassments, Russia probably has found a solution, which is to stop flirting with Europe and focus on building alliances with the rising Asian powers. Russia can sell its natural resources to the emerging markets of China and India, the largest importers of energy in the world. Russia is also improving its connectivity with Iran to finally have free access to the warm water seaport. As it looks now, the Russian geographic limitations, the historic neglect from Europe, and little over-ambitious leadership mostly explain the Russian attitude. Following up on that, Russia has chosen to break up the Russian-European ties in favor of Asian powers. If that wasn't bad enough, many countries around the world are interested in joining these alliances, especially BRICS, which is now becoming a truly global alliance. The fragile relations of European countries are showing signs of a divide within the European Union. When major economies like France and Germany want to stay in business with Chinese market and use Russian oil. To conclude, one can simply say it doesn't matter what Russia did in the past, the current Russian actions will only be defined by its future ambitions of surviving and sustaining Russian power.